So I guess I'll start at the beginning.
Okay. What about the middle?
Well, actually, it kind of goes back and forth in your life,
Right,
but
right.
you'll.
Okay. And if anything occurs to you,
So, where were you born?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York. Um, my father tells me I was born of impoverished nobility. It was Brooklyn Heights, my dear. But I grew up in Flatbush with a bunch of kids who are still very vivid in my memory.
What influence did Brooklyn have on you as a child, or even as an adult?
Well, Brooklyn influenced me in that I wanted to leave Brooklyn. I wanted to go to Hollywood. I wanted to be a performer, which is something I think I knew when I was about 3 years old. As a matter of fact, I'm told that my grandfather, watching me dance around the living room, said one day, "This child will either end up on stage or in jail." Fortunately for me, it was the former. Um, and I wanted to, I had been told too that a lot of celebrities had come from Brooklyn, and I wanted to be one of them.
When you were a child growing up at home, what influence did your parents have on you going into show business?
Well, I think the most important influence my parents had on me in terms of my life's work was their sense of humor. In my father's case, who's 93 years old, it still is an influence on my life. Um, it it gave me an appreciation for humor. It made me think and feel what's funny. I appreciated humor in others. I wasn't a class clown or anything. I didn't try to be funny. But when years later I was on the Dick Van Dyke Show, hired to be the straight woman who would ask the comedian the questions, they then began to write for me to be the comedian too. And I know it came from them, from my folks.
So, you started your career as a dancer.
Hmm.
What made you veer away from dancing and become an actress?
Lack of work. I guess I wasn't as good a dancer as I thought I was. I worked a little bit, but it was mostly chorus work. I was one in a crowd, and I really wanted to be Leslie Caron or Sid Charisse or Moira Shearer, who starred in The Red Shoes. And that didn't seem to be possible. They weren't making so many musical movies at the time. And I really wanted to be on my own. And so I had an agent who said to me, "Well, go ahead and try it. We'll set up some interviews for you. But just remember this: dancers can't act, and actors can't dance. And that's the way it's meant to be." So, with that positive attitude, I went forward.
In 1955, you did a commercial dressed as an elf.
Yeah.
I know this because my mother has talked about it, seeing you and how your face stood out, and it was remembered by her.
Ah, that's nice of your mother to remember. And she was young when she watched me, eh?
Yes.
Thank you. I have so many people who say, I grew up watching you. And I say, yeah, I did too. It was very young. Actually, that series of commercials on the Ozzie and Harriet show, television series, was for the Hot Point appliances. And it was the very first job I had. It was right after I graduated from high school. The prom was on Monday night, and I went to work on a Tuesday. And it kept me very busy, very happy for many, many months. But I also got married shortly after I began those commercials. And within months, I found that I was pregnant. Now, I was playing a pixie in the commercials. I was this little elf named Happy Hot Point, and I would be superimposed ice skating on an ice tray. I would be popping out of the oven saying, "Hi, Harriet, aren't you glad you use Hot Point appliances?" And I was doing acrobatics, cartwheels, leaping around. And so when I started to show a little bit, I said, you have to know I'm pregnant, and what do you want to do about it? And they said, well, we're going to get another Happy Hot Point. So goodbye and good luck to you.
Did you know then that you were destined for stardom, or were you happy then, just doing commercials?
I wanted stardom. I really did want it. I wanted to. I wanted to have the ability to express myself, whether as an actress or as a dancer or as a singer. And I didn't really train in acting, but in dancing and singing I did. Um, I wanted, I think I wanted attention. I didn't want to be in the group. And yet, as an adult, my happiest times are when I'm a part of a group in my work. Um, the camaraderie of the people on the Dick Van Dyke Show, for example, and on the Mary Show, a couple of films I've done where we've all gotten to be close buddies. I love that.
In your mid-20s, you were struck with a disease. What compromises did you have to make, if any, because of that?
Well, I was struck with diabetes, and it wasn't until I was in my mid-30s, which doesn't make any difference as far as your question is concerned. But diabetes is a strange killer. It's the side effects, the consequences of diabetes that is so life-threatening. Diabetes is the second leading cause of adult onset blindness. It affects the kidneys, it affects the heart, it can cause strokes. It's a really devastating disease. It's the leading cause of amputation, non-traumatic amputation. So it's no fun and games, this disease, but I do the best I can to keep myself in control. I check my blood 4 times a day, and I inject insulin 4 times a day. And that seems to be keeping me on the straight and narrow. I also work very hard for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, which is an organization that seeks funds to pour into research to cure this miserable situation. And I go to Washington and lobby Congress to give more money to the National Institutes of Health, which then finance the research.
In 1969, you co-starred in a film called Change of Habit
Yes.
with Elvis Presley. What did you think of him as a man and an actor, and what was your experience like working with him?
Oh boy, that's a lot to talk about. He was wonderful. He was so fit and determined to do well. He had been doing a lot of Viva Las Vegas kind of, two-dimensional roles, and he really wanted to express himself as an actor. And he chose this script, which was the story of, now it sounds silly, and as a matter of fact, it kind of was, but the intention was that it be a serious story about a nun. I was the nun who was working in the streets with the ghetto people and was therefore not wearing a habit, was wearing regular street clothes. And Elvis, who was a surgeon working in a hospital, who also occasionally played the guitar and, hummed a little ditty here or there, and a young girl who had autism. And we were focused on her. Now, during the scenes in which we tried to help this young girl, Elvis, the doctor, the musical singing surgeon, developed a kind of a crush on me, the nun, who looked like a regular girl, lady person, and I somewhat on him. And at the end of the story, you see me in church. Elvis is playing a guitar mass, and I am there back in my habit, and I am looking from Elvis to the statue of Jesus, and then back to Elvis. You don't know which one I chose. And then a close-up of Jesus, close-up of me back to Elvis, tight on Jesus, back to me, and you never did find out which one I chose. Elvis said after that movie, it had to be because I was the last one that he worked with. He said, I have slept with every one of my leading ladies except one. And I don't want to bust anyone's cover, but I know who the one was. And what was I thinking of?
So someone quoted you saying that sometimes you have to get to know someone really well to realize that you are really strangers.
Did I say that? It's a little too profound for me.
That's what I found.
Wow.
I
You
guess.
have to know somebody really well to realize how little you know that person? I never thought that thought, much less spoke it, but let's deal with that. I think that's an interesting premise. I think that is true. For example, when you fall in love and you marry, you really don't know very much about each other. And 25 years later, you're intimate, God knows, after all those years, and you realize more and more as that time goes by that you really don't know a whole lot about them, that you are still discovering new facets, new aspects of each other. Is that, do you think, what I meant when I didn't say that?
That works. Okay, so you've played many different roles on television, films, and on stage over the years. When a film is offered to you, what's the process you use, and where do you reach into yourself to arrive at that decision to accept or deny a particular role?
I love that command seat you give me. Well, I'm always very happy when somebody asks me to do something. And basically, whether it's a comedy or a drama, the first thing I look for is an absence of cliches. I don't ever want to read a script wherein I say to myself at a certain point, oh, I know what's going to happen now. No, 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 no. You have to be surprised. You have to come up with attitudes that weren't expected either from me or the other people. It's got to be real. It's got to be human. I also look for moments that connect with me personally. It doesn't have to be smack on. For example, in order to play a murderess, I don't need to actually have murdered someone, although I did once, but we'll go on from that. I just look for freshness.
All right. Who was it that you murdered?
No, you know where that comes from.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, an actress who lives in California, she's my good best friend, and she and I used to have our little private joke if we'd be on the elevator and other people in the elevator, when the door opened as we're exiting, one of us would say to the other, "She killed her husband, you know."
So when the name Mary Tyler Moore is mentioned, everybody from teenagers to adults adores you. How do you deal with that in your everyday life?
It's nice for me because people don't bother me. They have nice things to say. I really enjoyed your work, or I'm glad you're working for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. That kind of thing makes me feel warm, and that somewhere in this vast room, if I'm shopping in a big store, there is a person who would be nice to me if I asked her or him to be.
So my next question is, do you take more joy in working in front of a live audience or on a set of a film?
You know, I like both, which is the multi-camera technique. Many series are shot that way. Ours were the Van Dyke Show and my show, where you have an audience of about 300 people, which is all you need to get the reaction you want in a comedy. And it's best that it be a comedy. And yet you have the protection. You're nervous. You want to please that group of people, but you have the protection of film in that you can stop, you can back up a few words and start again and cover that nasty little mistake and go on. It's a perfect world. I just did a 3-part episode of that 70s show, which is the first multi-camera I've done in a long time, and it was shot on the film stage where we did my series, and I love it. I forgot how much I love it, and I like film. I like doing features more than anything because you have the luxury of time, slightly larger budget, so that things aren't always right down to the line. Um, yeah, movies, 3 camera.
So you worked on the Mary Tyler Moore Show for 7 wonderful years. When it ended, was it a sad moment for you, or did you feel ready to move on to new things?
It was both. I was ready to move on once they told me I had to move on. By that I mean the writers, then the director, and some of our cast members. It was time. It was 7 years, which back then was a lot, you know. And I knew it was right for me to move on. Then I did Ordinary People and a play on Broadway. So those were all good things, but it was like losing my family. They really became a part of me. And saying goodbye to them, even though we all knew we weren't going to different continents, you know, the likelihood was it would never be the same. And it hasn't been. We see each other from time to time, but I live in New York and they live in California, so it's a very special occasion when we get to see each other.
7 years is a long time.
Oh, yeah. And it wasn't just the actors, it was the prop men and the assistant director, you know, all of those people who become your buddies. Yeah.
In your profession, sometimes you're faced with making a decision based on what your beliefs are, which can make you appear tough or even vulnerable. How do you make a decision and keep your integrity as an artist?
I feel that unless the really scary parts or the difficult to accept parts of a movie are just gratuitous, unless it's just there to drum up business from young, healthy males, which is not asked of me very often these days, that there isn't anything that I could play that would be unacceptable. As long as I believe that that person knew what she was doing and believed she was doing the best thing she could, which I believe is true of every human being. I mean, I believe Adolf Hitler believed that what he was doing was right and that God was on his side. So I always go into a role, fortunately not having to play Mr. Hitler, believing that the truth will come out, the truth of the performer played through the reality of the character will emerge and be acceptable. If not understandable, at least recognizable. Did any of that make sense?
No, it made sense.
my head is reeling just a bit.
No, it made a lot of sense. It made more sense than I expected.
Okay. God, what a nice guy you are.
I'm just being honest.
Thank you.
Okay, so you've won 6 Emmy Awards.
No,
No.
I won 7 Emmy Awards.
7 Emmy Awards.
Yes.
Okay, well, I have down here 2 for the Dick Van Dyke Show,
Mm-hmm.
3 for the Mary Tyler Moore Show,
Yeah,
and 1 for Stolen Baby.
right. It was actually 2, it was 3 for the, how many did you say for the Mary Show?
For the Mary Show, 3.
3. Well, it was 4. Because during the run of that show, there came a time when the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences decided to add an additional category to the awards, which was best or most applauded, whatever, actress in any series. It covered comedy and drama. And I won that year, but that was the last year they did that. So I have 7. Yeah, no, I read that the other day in somebody's column that I had won 6 Emmys, which is nice enough, you know. But I'm not parting with that 7th.
You shouldn't.
No.
Which one makes you the happiest and the most proud, and why?
I think maybe the Stolen Babies Emmy, which was for the portrayal of a real-life woman who, during the 30s and 40s, would talk poor, indigent couples to give up their babies because they could be given to a wealthy home. And people bought that. The parents of these babies thought, oh, that would be the most wonderful thing I could do for this child because I'm poor and who knows what the future will be. So they would give their babies to this awful woman, Georgia Tan, and she's who I played, who would then sell them to movie stars and other wealthy people. But she was quite notorious. And it's not so much that she was such a fascinating and awful human being, but it was the fact that I won an award for not being surrounded by family, not being surrounded by the Dick Van Dyke Show group or the Mary group. It was something that's not to deny the input of all the other actors in Stolen Babies. But you know what I mean. I'm usually at my best when I feel confident, and they gave me confidence.
In 1980, you starred in a movie directed by Robert Redford called Ordinary People.
Yeah.
What experience did you have working with such talent such as Donald Sutherland, Timothy Hutton, and Redford?
Well, it was breathtaking. It truly was. Donald was so rich in his performance and so giving off stage. Timothy Hutton was a joy, was a delight to be around. He was, I don't know how old he was, maybe 18 at the time. But you could see him just, like a flower in slow motion or fast motion when it just emerges right before your eyes. And Robert Redford had to be the best director I had ever worked with. He was amazing to me. He had done his homework. He knew what he wanted, and yet he would take suggestions from other people. If the cameraman went to him and said, you know what, I think maybe this angle would be a little better, and I'll tell you why, he would listen to him and sometimes say, yeah, you're right, let's bring the camera around and do this and do that. He also gave a wonderful gift to the performers. After almost every scene, he would say to us, okay, guys, play. And by that he meant take the same words, but do anything you want with them. Keep the same blocking, move in the same places you moved. But just, if you want to, scratch a place that you shouldn't be scratching, go ahead, do it. If you want to just do this or be angry instead of happy to see somebody, do it. And he got some wonderful reactions and interesting performances that way. And that's something I'm used to doing. I'm used to, because of the multi-camera technique, everybody pitches in. It is truly a community effort, with the director, of course, always at the helm. But Carl Reiner taught me that at a very early age. He said, I will take a suggestion from the man who makes the coffee. If it's a good one, doesn't matter. It can only make you look better.
That's so rare, too.
Yeah, you bet. You bet.
You also won 3 Golden Globe Awards. That's right?
Yes.
I just wasn't sure after the last.
Yeah, I know.
1 for the Dick Van Dyke Show, 1 for the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and 1 for Ordinary People.
Right. My 3 most exciting projects for different reasons. But, Dick and Ed and Ted and Gavin and Valerie, Cloris, and Ordinary People, Robert Redford, and those wonderful people.
Which of these makes you happiest and most proud, and why?
Probably my own series, just because I had to think more. I had to devise more interesting ways of playing a certain emotion or a certain comedy bit. On the Van Dyke Show, as much as they were generous to me and gave me comedy to do, I still was basically Dick's muse. And Ordinary People, while it was a joy to do, was a drama, which doesn't really completely touch my heart. And the Mary Show gave me everything I could ever want. So that has to be my favorite, I think.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Also, it's not so far in the distance, so I can remember it. I don't remember much about the Dick Van Dyke Show, but that's really almost true. I'll watch reruns of that, and I'll be wrapped up in it and think to myself, God, that's interesting. I wonder how that darling couple is going to work this out. I don't remember how it ends up. Not all the time. And I haven't lost it altogether. Really, I haven't.
I understand you're a vegetarian.
Yes.
What was the moment or experience that made you become a vegetarian?
My love of animals and my feeling that they are worthy of more than we give them, more than we attribute to them. And we have a farm up in the country, and one day I was out strolling around and walked past a paddock that had cows in it. And as I sometimes did, I did walk over to the fence of the paddock, and there was a cow fairly close, which is surprising because they don't like to interact too much. And I found myself staring into her eyes, and I thought to myself, those eyes are no less complicated than my own. What are we doing? This was not meant to be, to eat them. I went home and I sat down to my cheeseburger, and I couldn't get it down. I mean, literally would not go down my throat. And that was the beginning of it. I never became a pure vegan vegetarian, meaning that you don't even touch dairy products, for which you don't have to kill the animal. I still eat eggs, but I consider that a borrowing. And I drink milk products, but I'm pretty much on the straight and narrow.
A few years ago, you wrote an autobiography revealing a lot of intimate details about your life. What did writing this book do for you personally?
Well, it kept me off the streets. I'll say that. It was a lot of hard work, but rewarding work. And through many years of my life, I had jotted down moments that I thought were meaningful, that were good moments, either funny or dramatic or whatever. And when I was talked into writing a book by Putnam, our publisher, I gathered all those things together, and I started writing the connecting threads and featured those moments. And I don't type, and I don't know anything about the computer. So I had to write in longhand and on a yellow lined paper, and sometimes around the border because I didn't want to stop and go to another page. And I would give them to my assistant, and he would put them in the computer and type them out and give them back to me. And before I knew it, I had this many pages and then began the process of editing and maybe changing a few things around. But I wrote that book on my own, and I'm very proud of it. However, on the subject of the book, because I did mention my parents from time to time, my father said, after it came out, he said, well, I read your book. Very well done. And I said, oh, Dad, do you mean it? He said, no, but it was very well done.
You've had your share of tragedies, the loss of loved ones, divorce, and your battle with disease. Where are you at this time and moment in your life?
I'm ready for anything. You know what I mean? When you've had a lot of things come out of darkness, you never again are placent about what can happen. But fortunately, it hasn't changed my general attitude and hopefulness. I'm certainly nervous about what's going on in the world today. I almost hate to pick up the newspaper in the morning. And, the corruption that we see unfolding daily from people we have trusted. A lot of that worries me. The other things I'm just aware of and ready for. I'm not worried about.
On the Mary Tyler Moore Show, in the opening credits, Mary stops to joyously throw her hat up in the air. This was a wonderful expression of freedom, and as a filmmaker, I'd like to know whose idea was it? Was it yours?
It was sort of a lot of people's. It was my hat. I'll say that. My aunt had given it to me for Christmas, and we went to Minneapolis to do all these opening shots, and it was very much on the wing, off the cuff, and it was bitter cold. It was January in Minneapolis, and we were outside just doing, Mary coming out this door, Mary going in that door, Mary picking up a flower, smelling it, and then the director said, he was a man who didn't direct any of the episodes of the show, but was directing the opening titles, said, Mary, run out into the intersection there and take that darling hat off and throw it in the air, will you? And there was traffic coming from every direction, but we were so cold and my lips were so blue, I would have given anything for it all to be over. Either kill me or let me go inside and be done with this. So I dutifully went off into the middle of the intersection and threw my hat in the air. And to an aficionado of the show, if you look in the background, there is a woman with her hair in a bandana who's looking at me like that. And I met her. Hazel was her name. And I said to her, Hazel, why were you scowling? You looked like you were very angry. She said, well, I was afraid you were going to kill yourself. And it was so nice meeting her. So funny.
How much of Mary Richards was Mary Tyler Moore?
Oh, a lot. A lot of my mannerisms, my gestures, my timing and conversations. But I'd like to think someday, maybe if there is such a thing as reincarnation, I could be as good as Mary Richards. I mean, she really was something. She was outgoing and energetic and determined and aware of other people around her. And yet she had her failings too, and I loved her for that almost as much. I loved especially the scene when she went into Lou Grant's office and asked him why it was she had just gotten this information that the man who had her job before her was paid more money than she was. And he went through a little bit of a tap dance about it, and when he saw that I wasn't buying it, he said, would it help if I told you that the man who had the job was married and had 3 children? And what I loved about her was that she said, yes, it would. Thank you. I'm sure it didn't make Gloria Steinem or Bella Abzug or any of my women's liberation friends very happy to hear that, but nonetheless.
A statue of Mary Richards was erected in Minneapolis. People will see it for many generations to come.
Yes.
How did it feel to have this incredible honor?
Well, it's a little like that movie, The Portrait of Dorian Gray, in a sense. That was a movie about a man who made a pact with the devil and said, if you don't age me, if you let me look young forever, you can take this big painting of me and age it. So we kept the painting in a dark, hidden room, and it was aging. It was just falling apart. And he remained perfect, beautiful. And that statue will always remain perfect, unless the pigeon droppings collect and freeze, I guess. But no, it was such an honor and so much fun.
If you could give one piece of advice to a filmmaker like me searching for a dream that may or may not happen, what would it be?
Don't say it may not. Just don't do that. Just believe in yourself and keep going. Be prepared for the tough moments. when you're going to be tempted to think, oh, well, I don't have it. He's so much better than I am, or, well, look what she's doing. Forget it. Just follow your conviction and let it build all the time. But really want this, really want it, because our business is tough. So you got to be strong.
Okay, my last question is from inside the actor's studio. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
You understood my animals, and I thank you for that. Come on in.
Thank you.
Thanks.